Good morning and welcome to Way Too Early, the show that really can't believe this was 1 year ago. I'm Ali Vitale. You've probably seen me out on the campaign trail or chasing after elected officials and breaking down whatever craziness is going on in Congress. It has been a dream realized getting to be a political reporter these last nearly 10 years. And now I'm thrilled to take over here on Way Too Early. Still thrilled, still Ali Vitale. Very honored to start every day with all of you. It's Tuesday, January 6th, 1 year of Way Too Early with this fabulous, fabulous team here in studio in the control room. I'm thankful to be with all of you. Let's get right to the news, because roughly 2 days after they were seized in Caracas during a massive U.S. military raid, deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores made their first appearance yesterday in New York court. The two pleaded not guilty to federal charges related to drugs and weapons and will be held without bail until their next court date in mid-March. During the arraignment, Maduro, dressed in prison garb, you see pictures there on the screen, appeared defiant, describing himself to the U.S. district judge as captured, innocent, and, quote, the president of my country. His wife echoed that sentiment, calling herself the, quote, first lady of the Republic of Venezuela. Those words could offer a window into a possible defense strategy here if Maduro tries to argue head of state immunity, although the U.S. doesn't recognize him as a legitimate leader. Yesterday's hearing also came to a dramatic close when a man in the courtroom stood up and screamed at Maduro in Spanish, saying he will pay for his crimes. The ousted leader responded, quote, I'm a kidnapped president. I'm a prisoner of war. And in a phone interview with NBC News, President Trump insisted the United States isn't at war with Venezuela, suggesting the U.S. might pay oil companies, too, to help rebuild the country's energy infrastructure. Trump said, quote, we have to nurse the country back to health, adding, quote, a tremendous amount of money will have to be spent and the oil companies will spend it, and then they'll get reimbursed by the U.S., by us, or through revenue. Trump also insisted his supporters will stick with him, telling NBC News, MAGA loves it. MAGA loves what I'm doing. MAGA loves everything I do. On this one, some dissent, at least on the way in which he's doing it and the lack of a clear path forward. Still, the president defended the move to capture Maduro without congressional approval, saying Congress knew what we were doing, though he declined to elaborate when he asked what Congress actually knew and whether lawmakers had advance notification about the operation. Most have said they didn't. Meanwhile, congressional leaders emerged sharply divided after their first classified briefing on this U.S. raid that captured Maduro. The closed-door session for top House and Senate leaders drew criticism from Democrats, who said the administration offered few answers about next steps. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called the plan vague and unsatisfying. The House Speaker, meanwhile, defended the White House, insisting there will be no American troops on the ground and no occupation. This is not a regime change, Johnson said. Some members of Congress were notably excluded from the briefing, including the Senate Judiciary Committee. In a rare bipartisan joint statement, committee leaders Chuck Grassley and Dick Durbin said in part, quote, there's no legitimate basis for excluding the Senate Judiciary Committee from this briefing. The administration's refusal to acknowledge our committee's indisputable jurisdiction in this matter is unacceptable. We'll see if they push for more there, though I think the expectation is that a wider circle of members will be briefed in the coming days or potentially weeks. Republican Senator Rand Paul, though, criticized President Trump's raid in Venezuela and the seizing of President Maduro during an interview with reporters on the Hill yesterday. Paul blamed Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina for changing Trump's views on foreign policy, which Paul said were originally against regime change and nation building. Watch.
It was something I liked about Donald Trump. It was one of the things, whenever I had misgivings about something else, I would always come back and say, well, he's the best we've ever had, much better than the Bushes, who were war mad and wanted to be involved in all these crazy wars overseas, and we're going to make the world safe for democracy. I never liked any of that, and I thought Trump was different. And so it disappoints me, but he's under the thrall of Lindsey Graham.
You really can't blame Paul for assuming that America first and a non-interventionist foreign policy that Trump largely did advocate. He was vehemently against long-term American engagement overseas in the Middle East, for example. But suddenly, this has changed, especially as Graham, who's a longtime foreign policy hawk, has advocated for using military force against a host of countries. After the operation in Venezuela, Senator Graham called for regime change, not just there, but in Cuba and Iran. want to bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde. David, you've, of course, been following all of this closely. So let's just start with yesterday's arraignment. I was on the air during it. I think it was stunning the way that the courtroom unfolded, the comments that Maduro made, the window that it might give us into the way that he and his wife might try to defend themselves as they put in that not guilty plea. What stood out to you about what we heard unfolded, of course, because there were no electronic devices in the courtroom itself?
I think it's a suggestion of a defense strategy that Maduro is going to claim as a head of state. He's exempt from this criminal prosecution. I'm not sure. I don't think that will hold up because this was an indictment of him many years ago during the first Trump administration for drug trafficking and other crimes. And legal experts that we've had on air have said this appears to be a fairly strong case. But it shows how he's going to try to frame this politically. His problem is that there won't be another court appearance for weeks. He's going to have limited communications with the outside world, and frankly, his record in Venezuela is so long, and I think there's such opposition to him. I'm not sure this will be an effective, at least, defense in the public arena.
Yeah, but it's going to be a lengthy process regardless. And I think yesterday, just the stunning reality of seeing a head of state, legitimately recognized or not, right, and it is or not in this instance, according to U.S. foreign policy, in a U.S. federal courthouse, I think was just really a dramatic turn of events. But I also think it's important the way that President Trump himself has spoken about this and really what it means for U.S. foreign policy when it comes to being at war, or he says not, with Venezuela, suggesting the U.S. government might reimburse oil companies, too, for rebuilding Venezuela's infrastructure. I mean, what do these comments tell you about what the plan is? Because the plan has been vague publicly.
The plan's vague, and these are he's trying to get around the hard challenges that lay ahead. He's going to reimburse oil companies for rebuilding the oil sector there. That means taxpayers are going to pay for the rebuilding of the oil sector there. And then the key issue is that there was a Stephen Miller interview also yesterday, but there's a view that having all these Navy ships off the coast of Venezuela threatening further raids or airstrikes is going to cause what's essentially the Maduro regime without Maduro to do what the U.S. says. And experts are saying that if there's any hope of actually stabilizing the oil industry, there's going to be a need for security, any hope of holding elections. You would need a U.S. troop presence on the ground, that essentially the experts needed to go back and rebuild the oil industry, and the companies are going to need, guarantees in terms of the security there. So we'll see what happens, how much cooperation occurs, but this is an approach that the U.S. hasn't used in the past, and I don't know of a country that has done this in the past, at least in the last century, where it's essentially gunboat diplomacy and you threaten, but you have actually no forces on the ground, and we'll see if that works.
Yeah, especially as the administration has really left the door open to the potential of having to do a second wave. Might that include U.S. troops? I think all of that is an open question, and certainly something that lawmakers in my conversations with them, and I'm sure with you as well, have been, I think, concerned about. The idea that they don't have an idea of what the plan is here, and also they worry for troops being committed to a conflict that has no clear end game. That's certainly key. But another piece of this story, David, is Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who's publicly challenged Trump now to come get me, in his words, after Trump suggested Petro could face the same fate as Maduro. Trump told reporters on Sunday that Petro's days are numbered, in Trump's words, and that Colombia is run by a sick man, in his words again, who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you. Asked directly whether the U.S. would pursue a military operation against Colombia, Trump said, "It sounds good to me." Petro, who condemned the U.S. operation in Venezuela, appeared to then taunt Trump on Monday, writing in a statement, quote, "Come get me, I'm waiting for you here," and rejected any threat of invasion. I think this is the concern, David, on the part of lawmakers who see what happened in Venezuela, and even if they agree with getting rid of Maduro because they know he was a dictator and a thug, at the same time, there's concern about what this might mean for other dominoes to fall, whether it's in Colombia, whether it's in Cuba, whether it's in Iran. I mean, what does it say that it seems like everything is on the table, and why is that concerning to experts that you're talking to?
Because Colombians are proud of running their own country. Venezuelans, now that Maduro is gone, want to run their own country. So this is a nationalist response. And Petro, several things the president said are incorrect. Petro is a democratically elected president. There's a new election in August, I believe, next year in Colombia, but definitely next year. The allegations of drug trafficking are not proven. He's not indicted in court the way Maduro is. And so it might even help Petro to defy Trump domestically inside Colombia to stand up to him. And this is going to be the challenge. Are there Venezuelans who are going to defy Trump? There's a belief, it seems, in the White House that having all this force will just cause people to cow and give up and agree to what the U.S. wants. And there's, again, this long history of intervention in Latin America. And frankly, interventions in the Middle East did not go well. Foreign countries do not like doing whatever an American president tells them. Right. That's not popular with those populations. So this is a first act of defiance, and there could be more.
But again, even seeing the strategy that you're laying out, and this has been Trump's method, whether it's in domestic policy, lean hard on people, bully them into getting what you want until they take the stance that you want them to. And now, of course, applying it diplomatically on the world stage. We saw it, I think, in way less fashion during the first Trump turn, but certainly now. And I think that this bullying fashion really stands very, very oppositely to reading the national security strategy that they put out just at the end of the year, where they talk about the fact that America first relies on the fact that every country is a sovereign country that is proud of its own leadership. And then, of course, watching the way those two things are now working in tandem is interesting, fascinating, but also breeds some concern in terms of what this administration might do next. I know you're going to be tracking all of it as you have been. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde, thank you, as always.